I stood in the bridal suite surrounded by blush dresses and champagne flutes, then stepped out in full dress blues. The room fell silent. My sister's jaw clenched. "You really wore that," she whispered. I had, not to ruin her wedding, but to remind her and everyone else who I really am. This is a story about silent scars and standing tall when even family tries to shrink you. And trust me, you'll want to hear how it ends. My name is Avery Cole. I'm 31 years old, and not long ago I took off the army uniform I'd worn for nearly 10 years. I'm still getting used to the silence that follows years of relentless noise. The quiet doesn't come easy. You don't realize how loud the world inside you has become until there's nothing left to drown it out. It was a Tuesday morning when the envelope arrived. Cream-colored, thick cardstock, my name handwritten in Lena's familiar cursive. I stood in my tiny kitchen, holding it like it might detonate. Her handwriting hadn't changed since high school, rounded loops, a touch of flourish like everything she did. Effortless, elegant, composed. Inside was the expected an invitation to her wedding in early June, all white and gold foil, boasting a venue at a historic New England country club. I barely noticed the date or the RSVP deadline because my eyes had already zeroed in on the note scribbled below the formal print. "I hope you'll be my maid of honor." I read it once, then again, and again, and then I sat down on the floor back against the fridge and cried. Not loud heaving sobs, not the kind of tears people write about in romantic novels. These were quiet, careful, the kind that creep up on you after years of bracing yourself against impact. Because in that moment, I wasn't a soldier or a veteran or a daughter. I was a sister. A sister who had spent the better part of 10 years being a ghost in her own family. Lena and I used to be close once upon a time. We were the kind of sisters who made up dance routines in the living room, who stayed up late whispering in bunk beds about boys and futures, and which clouds looked most like castles. But then life happened. Or more accurately, expectations happened. Lena was always the shining one. 3 years older, blonde with porcelain skin, and a confidence that seemed baked in from birth. She made honor roll, joined student council, got accepted to Dartmouth, early decision. She hosted dinner parties before I could legally drink and talked about quarterly projections at age 25, like it was casual conversation. And me, I was the opposite of that. The loud, messy, complicated kid. I asked the wrong questions in church, climbed trees in my Sunday dress, and never once colored inside the lines. My report cards were filled with phrases like bright but unfocused or a challenge to authority. Every teacher conference ended the same way. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" That phrase followed me like a shadow. At 17, I made a decision no one saw coming. I walked into a recruiter's office and signed my name on a dotted line. Not out of rebellion, not even out of patriotism if I'm honest. I wanted purpose, structure, something that felt real in a world where I never quite fit. I waited until dinner to tell them. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd respect the courage it took. They didn't. My mother dropped her fork. My father didn't speak. And Lena, she just looked at me like I'd dropped a grenade in the middle of the table, like I'd made myself foreign. I shipped off to basic training while Lena started her graduate program in strategic communication. She sent me one email that year. One. Over the next decade, our paths could not have diverged more sharply. While I was running convoys through dust-choked roads in Kandahar, she was sipping champagne on rooftops in Boston. I'd write postcards sometimes. She never wrote back. Maybe she didn't know what to say. Or maybe she didn't want to confront the reality of who her sister had become. And then, this. This wedding. This note. This fragile olive branch. I wanted to believe it meant something. That Lena missed me. That she wanted me by her side because I mattered, not because it would look good in photos or check some family obligation box. But I'd learned not to trust pretty packaging, especially when it came wrapped in family expectation. Still, I said yes. I checked the RSVP card, the ink trembling just slightly as I filled in "will attend." Then I opened my laptop and searched for dresses. Something I hadn't done in years. Something about it felt like slipping into a life that never really fit but still hung in the closet waiting. That night, I dug out an old photo album I hadn't touched in ages. The cover was faded, edges worn. I flipped through pages filled with childhood birthdays, beach trips, snow days. There we were, me and Lena, on the swing set behind our house, both in rainbow-striped swimsuits. Her arm was slung around me like I was her favorite thing. I stared at that photo for a long time, because the truth is, I couldn't remember the last time I felt like someone's favorite anything. Page after page reminded me of what we used to be. Before expectations, before judgment, before war and distance and silence. Prom pictures, hers smiling in satin and pearls. Me that same night covered in grease from fixing my motorcycle. Graduation shots. Lena's cap and gown perfectly centered. I wasn't in those. I was already at Fort Jackson sweating through my first week of basic training. Still, we came from the same house, shared the same bathwater, ate the same pancakes on Sunday mornings. I closed the album and stared at the ceiling, wondering, not for the first time, if love could survive disappointment, if family could recover from forgetting each other. I didn't have answers, but I packed anyway. I took leave, bought a plane ticket, and as I zipped up my duffel bag, I allowed myself a dangerous thought. What if this was the moment everything changed? What if Lena saw me? Not the uniform, not the distance, not the choices she didn't understand, but me, Avery Cole, sister. Maybe, just maybe. The night before the rehearsal dinner, I was smoothing the folds of my ecru dress when Lena appeared in the doorway. She didn't knock, just stood there, arms crossed, lips pressed into a line, her gaze fixed on the garment hanging from the closet door like it was something offensive, something shameful. I didn't turn right away. I wanted to pretend for just one more second that she'd come in to say something kind, something sisterly, something simple like, "You look nice." But that wasn't Lena. Not anymore. Not with me. When I finally turned to face her, her face was already set. "You can't wear that," she said. The words landed sharp even though her voice was quiet. Controlled. I blinked. "Excuse me?" "That dress," she said, nodding toward it. "It's too close to white." "It's ecru," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Off-white, technically. Soft and neutral. It's the only other formal dress I brought besides the one for the ceremony. She stepped into the room, her heels making no sound on the carpet, but her presence somehow loud. "It's not just the shade," she said. "It's what it means." That caught me off guard. What it means? Her fingers twitched at her sides. She was nervous. That much was obvious. But not in a vulnerable way. In a calculated, tight-lipped way. The way she got before client pitches or family holidays. "White is traditional," she said at last. "Symbolic. It represents purity." I stood there, heart-slowing hands by my sides, so Lena swallowed. "It's just not for everyone. Not for everyone," I echoed. "Or not for me." She didn't answer right away. And that was enough. "You think I don't deserve to wear it?" I said, voice steady. "Because of what I've done. Because I signed a different contract than you did. Avery, that's not fair. Isn't it?" I stepped closer. "You've been tiptoeing around me since I got here. Looking at my scars like they're stains. Talking to me like I'm a walking press release you have to spin. So just say it. Say what you mean." She flinched slightly. "I just don't want people asking questions." "What kind of questions about your background?" she said carefully. "Your time overseas. The things that might come up." "The things that might come up," I repeated. "Like the fact that I served 3 tours, that I saved lives, that I have friends who didn't come back." She looked down, her cheeks flushing. "You're ashamed," I said, more surprised than angry. "Not of what I've done, but of how it makes you look. You're afraid people will see me in a pale dress and forget which one of us is the bride." "That's not true," she said quickly, but her voice lacked conviction. I let out a quiet breath, the kind that burns a little on the way out. "Do you remember the night I enlisted?" She didn't speak. "I told Mom and Dad after dinner," I continued. "I waited until dessert, thought maybe the pie would sweeten the news. Mom dropped her fork. Dad looked like I'd confessed to arson. And you? You didn't say anything." "I didn't know what to say," she murmured. "No, you knew," I said. "You just chose silence. You looked at me like I'd shattered something sacred. It felt like you had," she admitted. "You were supposed to go to college. Like me. like everyone expected. That's the difference between us, Lena. You wanted to meet expectations. I wanted to meet reality. She folded her arms tighter, the fabric of her blouse bunching at the elbow. Ryan's family is very traditional. His mother is opinionated. They don't really understand military life. They think it's violent. Yes, she said, almost whispering. And messy. I nodded slowly. You mean they think I've done things? Bad things? I don't know what you've done, she said, her voice cracking slightly. And maybe that's part of it. Maybe it scares me. I didn't reply right away. I was trying to keep my body from shaking. Not from rage, but from restraint. I'm not proud of every moment I said, but I'm not ashamed of any of it. I made choices. I lived with them. And I survived. That doesn't make me impure. She bit her lip. But it makes you different. That hit harder than I expected. I sat down on the bed, the ecru dress beside me now seeming far more fragile than before. Do you think I don't feel different? Do you think I want to carry this weight every time I walk into a room with people like you? Like them? Lena stayed silent. This isn't about a dress, Lena, I said. It's about what you see when you look at me. You don't see your sister. You see a reminder that I didn't turn out like you, and you've never forgiven me for it. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. I just wanted this weekend to be perfect. Then don't make me a problem to hide, I said. Let me be here. Let me be me. We sat in that silence for a long time. Two sisters from the same house, one following the script, the other writing her own story. Finally, she said, "There will be photographers." I smiled sadly. There always are. When she left, I stayed in the room staring at the dress. Soft, modest, innocent even. But to her it was dangerous. Because to Lena, white was for girls who colored inside the lines. Girls who never raised their voices. Who never questioned the script. Girls like her, and whatever I was, whatever the uniform had made me, apparently I wasn't that kind of girl. I didn't know what color was left for people like me. But I was done letting someone else decide. The bridal boutique was everything I expected it to be, and everything I had hoped to avoid. Floor-to-ceiling mirrors, crystal chandeliers that caught and fractured the sunlight, soft violin music playing overhead like we were in a Jane Austen fever dream. A fluted glass of champagne was thrust into my hand before I even crossed the threshold, though I politely declined and asked for sparkling water instead. The other bridesmaids were already there, three of Lena's sorority sisters and Ryan's sister, Elise. They looked like variations on the same theme. Long, balayaged hair, flawless skin, pastel sundresses, and the kind of practiced smiles that made me feel like I'd shown up to a casting call by mistake. Avery. They chimed in unison, voices high and artificially sweet like a round of Stepford greetings. I smiled. Tight, polite, the same one I used in military briefings with people who didn't think I belonged at the table. Lena stepped in behind me, all glowing skin and soft curls, placing a hand on my back, like she was guiding me into enemy territory. "Everyone, this is my sister," she said with a note of presentation as if she were unveiling an antique vase. Beautiful once, but fragile and hard to place. I murmured hellos, then slipped into the dressing room to change. The dress was blush pink off-shoulder with a flowy chiffon overlay. Delicate, romantic, everything I was not. I had tried to get the right size, tried to imagine how I'd look surrounded by soft petals and tulle, but nothing had prepared me for the moment I stepped out and caught my reflection, and more painfully, Lena's reaction to it. Her smile faltered the second she saw me. "We need to do something about that," she said, walking toward me with her hand extended like a stylist on a mission. I followed her line of sight to my right shoulder. The faint scar was visible beneath the fabric. An angry trail left behind by shrapnel, a souvenir from Kandahar. "I can wear a shawl," I offered gently, but Lena was already talking over me. "And your posture. You're standing like a sentry. Could you, maybe, soften a little? Tilt your shoulders. Try not to look so prepared." Prepared. Like it was an accusation. I nodded mutely, adjusting my stance like a rookie cadet. She continued her checklist aloud, barely glancing at me. We'll need hair extensions for the ceremony. Something that softens your whole look. Oh, and we can contour the jawline a bit more just in case the makeup doesn't hold. I tried to laugh. I really did. Long gloves, one of the bridesmaids suggested cheerfully. Wouldn't that be chic? In June, I said, smiling through clenched teeth. The boutique staff were now fluttering around me like stylists prepping a mannequin. One pinned the dress tighter around my waist, another dabbed foundation onto my shoulder. The third examined my hair as if it were a design flaw, and through it all I stood still, silent, a blank canvas for Lena's perfect aesthetic. I watched myself in the mirror, this strange version of me being assembled piece by piece. None of it felt like armor. It felt like erasure. At one point I caught Elise watching me. Her expression wasn't unkind. It was curious, like she wasn't sure whether to be impressed or afraid. Avery, Lena said, voice clipped. Could you maybe smile? I did. But inside I was empty. To them, I was a detail to manage, a potential eyesore, a sister-shaped obstacle to the kind of beauty Lena was paying thousands of dollars to curate. The scar on my shoulder was just the visible part. What they couldn't see were the memories that clung to it, the sand, the smoke, the crack of gunfire in the distance, the moment I'd torn off my vest to stop a fellow soldier's bleeding, the moments after that when silence meant we were still alive. You don't survive things like that and come back soft. Later that evening, back at the house, I stood in the converted guest room. Once my childhood bedroom, now a half-used office with motivational quotes on the walls and a printer in the closet. I stared at myself in the full-length mirror, still in the bridesmaid dress. My hair was curled now, my makeup heavier than usual, my shoulders slumped in a way that felt foreign. This wasn't me. The me I knew stood tall. Not because she wanted to draw attention, but because she'd earned her posture, earned her presence. That night, I quietly packed my bag. I didn't make a scene, didn't announce anything. I left a note on the desk for my parents, thanking them for the guest room. Then I slipped out into the cool air, hailed a rideshare, and checked into a hotel by the waterfront. My suitcase was small, most of it was filled with wedding clothes. But nestled at the bottom, wrapped in a protective garment bag, was something I hadn't expected to need. My army dress blues. I hadn't planned to wear them. Not at the wedding. Not in front of Lena and her curated world. But when I unzipped the bag just a little and saw the crisp navy fabric and gold trim, a wave of clarity washed over me. That uniform wasn't just fabric. It was identity, memory, proof. Proof that I could be strong without apology. That I didn't have to shrink to fit someone else's frame. I lay on the bed staring at the ceiling, the sound of the waves muffled by the windows. I thought of all the versions of me Lena had never bothered to meet. The one who stayed up nights with her unit comforting a grieving soldier. The one who held her breath while patching a wound under fire. The one who laughed so hard during a monsoon in a mess tent that she cried. That Avery didn't wear blush pink. She wore resilience. And maybe it was time Lena met that sister. The hotel room was quiet. Too quiet. No background chatter. No doors opening and closing. Just the low hum of the air conditioner and the soft rustle of fabric as I laid my army dress blues across the bedspread. I stood over the uniform for a long time, just staring at it. The deep navy jacket, the lighter blue trousers with their gold piping, the neatly pressed white shirt and black tie. My polished shoes still tucked into the corner of the suitcase untouched. Everything was exactly how I'd packed it, as if waiting patiently for me to remember who I was. With careful hands, I reached for the jacket and ran my fingers over the rows of ribbons, each one stitched into place with quiet weight. Combat action badge, overseas service bars, Purple Heart, and just below the left shoulder the bronze star. That one always stopped me, not because it was the shiniest, but because of what it cost. I could still feel the dust from Kandahar in my mouth, still hear the ringing in my ears after the explosion, still remember the smell of scorched metal and adrenaline when I pulled Sergeant Blake from the smoking Humvee, his blood on my hands, his weight on my shoulders, and the moment that mattered most. when I looked into his fading eyes and refused to let go. Later, in a base ceremony that felt more awkward than honorable, a colonel had pinned the medal to my chest. For bravery and selfless action under fire, he'd said into the mic. There was a polite round of applause, a few claps from fellow soldiers, nods of respect. But no family, no Lena, no mom, no dad. I'd told them, of course. Sent an email, even called. But something had come up. Work appointments, discomfort they wouldn't name. Whatever the excuse, they hadn't come. Still, I had stood at attention that day. Chin high, shoulders squared. Not because I felt brave, but because I had to believe my strength could stand on its own. That maybe, just maybe, it didn't need anyone's approval to be real. And tonight, here I was again, alone in another room facing another ceremony. This time I wouldn't be getting a medal. I'd be getting glares, awkward stares, maybe whispers, but I was done hiding. I sat down on the edge of the bed and looked at myself in the mirror opposite the desk. For the first time in what felt like years, I studied my reflection, not the one in pastel pink chiffon with curled extensions and subtle lipstick, not the softer version Lena had tried to manufacture, just me, plain, real, and unguarded. My eyes wandered back to the uniform. There was a reverence in the way it lay on the bed, like it carried stories my family never asked to hear, truths no one wanted to claim. People think uniforms make you look sharp, intimidating, powerful, but for me, it was something else. It was honesty. I hadn't worn it in months. It wasn't even meant to be here, really. I'd packed it last minute, unsure why. Maybe out of habit, maybe out of hope. Now I understood. It wasn't about making a statement or starting a scene. It wasn't even about Lena. It was about me. About reclaiming a version of myself that I had folded up and tucked away, too afraid it would ruin someone else's picture. I didn't want to stand out at her wedding. I didn't want to draw attention or make it about me. But I also didn't want to keep wearing silence like a second skin. Because silence had become its own kind of camouflage. A way of disappearing without leaving the room. Of smoothing down your edges until you fit into someone else's story. And I was tired of disappearing. Wearing that dress again tomorrow, standing next to Lena like some accessory, felt like a betrayal I wasn't willing to repeat. Not after everything I had survived. I took a long shower. Let the water rinse the stiffness out of my limbs. Let it carry away the shame I'd unknowingly picked up piece by piece since arriving in Connecticut. Afterward, I stood in the towel for a while, staring at the garment bag. Then I unzipped it. One button at a time, I dressed myself. Not rushed, not dramatic, just methodical. Ritualistic. White shirt, blue trousers, jacket. The familiar snug fit of structure and dignity. I pulled my hair back into a tight, low bun, the way I always had when I needed to feel in control. I wiped away the layers of wedding makeup, leaving just enough to look alert but not performed. Last, I stood in front of the mirror and pinned the bronze star into place. I didn't smile. But I felt something settle inside me, like a beam realigning in a crooked house. This wasn't rebellion. This wasn't revenge. It was refusal. Refusal to be rewritten. Refusal to let someone else's idea of fitting in erase the parts of me I had bled for. Tomorrow I would show up. I would hold Lena's bouquet. I would walk where I was told. I would stand beside her while she married the man she loved. But I would do it on my own terms. Not as a prop. Not as a shadow. As a soldier. As a sister. As myself. The moment I stepped into the bridal suite, the room fell into stunned silence. The curling irons stilled mid-air. The soft hum of hairspray buttons paused. Perfume lingered in the air like a frozen breath. 5 women turned eyes, catching the gleam of the buttons on my uniform, the shine of the bronze star on my chest, and something even more glaring. The truth I was no longer hiding. Every reaction was a little different. Elise's lips parted in surprise, her mascara wand trembling in mid-stroke. Caitlin clutched her champagne flute as if it might offer her an explanation. Jillian tilted her head, eyes narrowing in curiosity as if unsure whether to be impressed or offended. And Lena just stared. She didn't speak immediately. Her expression shifted slowly. Shock to disapproval, disapproval to confusion, and finally to something quieter, more dangerous. Disbelief. What? What is this? She whispered, as if too loud a voice might collapse the moment. Avery, are you trying to start something? There was tension in her words, but also fear. Not the kind you scream about. The kind that builds in silence, like a hairline crack in porcelain that's been forming for years waiting to split. I didn't blink. I stood at parade rest, feet planted shoulder-width apart, spine straight, hands locked gently behind my back. It was a posture drilled into my body during basic training, but here it felt like armor. A stillness that gave shape to chaos. No, I said evenly. I'm not starting anything. I'm just done pretending. The silence that followed was thick and sharp, like walking through cobwebs in the dark. Every breath in that room became louder. You can't wear that to the ceremony, Lena said, stepping toward me. Her hands were tight fists, knuckles pale. It's not appropriate. I disagree. I answered, voice steady. Avery, she said, teeth clenched. Now this is my wedding. I know, I replied, meeting her gaze. That's why I'm here. In uniform. It's the most honest thing I own. She blinked rapidly. You'll be in the photos like that if that's what's required of me as a bridesmaid? I'll follow instructions. I'll smile. I won't ruin your timeline, but I won't erase myself to make anyone else more comfortable. I saw it hit her then. The realization that I wasn't backing down this time, that this wasn't about rebellion but reclamation, about the years I'd stayed silent, small, easy to ignore, and how I wasn't willing to keep doing that, not even for her. Her lips parted. Then came the question I knew had been festering inside her. You've been in combat. It wasn't curiosity. It was confirmation. Yes. Then, after a long pause, her voice dropped so low, it nearly disappeared. Have you ever killed someone? The air collapsed in on itself. Her words didn't land like an accusation. They landed like a wound finally exposed, raw, pulsing. I didn't answer. Not directly. Is that what you think of me? I asked quietly. That I'm dangerous. That I'm broken. That I'm unclean, somehow too damaged to stand next to you on your perfect day. Her eyes flicked away, her mouth set in a tremble. A part of me knew she hadn't meant to say it aloud. Another part knew she'd always thought it. She began, voice cracking. I don't know who you are anymore. I'm still your sister, I said gently. She looked up. I'm still the girl who snuck into your room at night during thunderstorms, who made you laugh by naming clouds. The one who stayed up late helping you finish that awful science fair project in 8th grade. That girl never left. Then why do I feel like I've lost you? Her voice fractured. When you enlisted, it felt like you vanished. I had to disappear, for a while. I needed to figure out who I was without everyone else's expectations. And when you came back, she whispered, it felt like there was a wall I couldn't see through. I nodded. I built it for survival. But I never meant for it to shut you out. She bit her lip, her mascara threatening to smudge. I wanted everything today to be perfect. So did I. I said, softer now. I just had to stop believing that perfect meant invisible. There was a quiet knock on the door. Our mother peeked in, her eyes immediately landing on me. For a moment she looked like she might cry. Then without a word she nodded and said, They're ready to line up. Lena didn't move. Her breathing was shallow, as if holding still might hold everything in place. I don't know what to do with this, she said at last. You don't have to do anything, I told her. You don't have to understand. Or fix it. Just let me be who I am. And let me stand beside you. She stared at me for a long moment. Searching. Not just my face, but the years she'd missed. The parts of me she never asked about. Maybe even the girl she used to braid hair for on Sunday mornings. Then finally she nodded. It wasn't enthusiastic. It wasn't triumphant. But it was something. A small door creaked open. And somewhere behind her, maybe without even realizing, she closed another one. On the version of me she'd clung to for so long. The soft-edged memory, the ideal, the shadow of a sister that never really existed. Now she was facing the real one. And for the first time in years, I felt seen. My mother was crying. Not loud sobs, not theatrical wailing, just the kind of quiet crying she'd perfected over the years. A trembling lip, wet eyes she pretended were from dust, hands that fluttered near her face trying to maintain composure in a room that had lost it. Lena's mascara was already ruined. Her cheeks flushed, jaw tight. "If you won't change," she said, voice shaky but sharp as glass, "then you can't be in the wedding party. I'm serious, Avery. I mean it." Her words hovered in the air like a dare. I stood still, not out of defiance, but because I had nothing else to give. And then the door creaked open again. We all turned. My father stepped into the room. The air shifted. He wasn't a man of many words, my dad. Not the kind to storm into a scene or break up arguments with grand speeches. Most of my life he had stayed quiet during family tensions, especially the ones that involved me. But this time he didn't hesitate. His gaze traveled across the room past the shocked bridesmaids, past my mother dabbing her tears, and landed squarely on me. He looked at my uniform. Really looked. From the stiff collar to the brass buttons to the row of ribbons on my chest, and then he walked over slow but purposeful until he was standing right in front of me. Without saying a word, he reached up and touched the bronze star on my uniform. His fingers were calloused, warm, familiar. They brushed over the metal like it was something fragile. "Bronze star," he said softly, almost to himself. "For valor under fire." A lump caught in my throat. Lena opened her mouth, maybe to protest, maybe to cry, but he raised a hand gently, still facing me. "She's not a criminal," he said, turning to her now. "She's not broken. And she's not some mistake we need to hide in the back row." "Dad? No." His voice was calm but firm. "She's a soldier, one who saved lives, one who did something that takes more courage than most of us will ever understand. Don't mistake your fear for judgment, Lena. Just because you don't understand what she's lived through doesn't mean she's wrong for living it." My mother sniffled, pressing a hand to her chest. No one else said anything. I didn't either. I couldn't. My hands were still behind me, my shoulders locked in that military posture, but inside something cracked. Not in a painful way, but like a beam finally releasing pressure. I wasn't his disappointment anymore. He didn't hug me. That wasn't his way. But he did meet my eyes and something passed between us. Not forgiveness, not even reconciliation. Just recognition. A silent, solid kind. "You should sit with us," he said, as if that had always been the plan. "Front middle, where family belongs." Lena didn't object. She just turned away, wiping her eyes, and started giving new instructions to the wedding planner. Jillian became maid of honor. Caitlin was bumped forward in the lineup. The bridesmaids adjusted with polite awkwardness, like people stepping around a sleeping dog they didn't want to wake. I left the suite quietly, carrying the folded blush dress I never wore. The ceremony was held in a white steepled church next door, its windows glowing with afternoon sun. The ushers blinked when they saw me, but didn't question it. "Bride's family?" one asked. "Sister of the bride," I answered. He nodded. "This way, ma'am." He led me to the third pew from the front. Not the back like Lena had threatened. Not the overflow seating for distant cousins. The middle, where the camera would pan, where faces would be remembered, where presence was acknowledged. I sat down slowly, adjusting the crisp lines of my trousers. And then someone sat beside me. A tall man in his late 60s, posture straight as a ruler, wearing a civilian suit that still screamed military. "Staff Sergeant," he said, tipping his head. I turned, surprised. He extended a hand. "Colonel Bradford, retired. I'm Ryan's uncle." I shook his hand, firm and respectful. "Avery Cole." He looked down at my ribbons and gave a slow, knowing nod. "Bronze Star," he murmured. "Desert Storm earned me one of those." "You Kandahar," I said. 2018. He whistled quietly. "Hell of a place. You walk out of there, you've earned every thread on that jacket." It was the first time all day someone spoke to me like they saw the whole picture, not just the parts they feared or didn't understand. I felt my shoulders lower. Just slightly. "You here alone?" he asked. "No," I said. "My parents are in the front. My sister's the bride." He arched a brow. Ah, so you're the one they didn't know what to do with. I smirked. Guilty. He chuckled. They'll figure it out. Or they won't. Doesn't change who you are. I looked up at the altar. The flowers were pale pink. The aisle runner was white and spotless. The pianist began to play the first notes of the processional. Colonel Bradford leaned in slightly. For what it's worth, he said, I think you showed up exactly the way you were supposed to. And for the first time that day I smiled, not out of politeness, not out of obligation, but because something had shifted. I'd come in thinking I might be seen as a disruption, a stain, a misfit. Instead, I was just Avery, no longer invisible, no longer apologizing for who I was, and sitting there beside someone who understood that without needing an explanation, I felt something I hadn't in a very long time: belonging. The reception had begun to thin out by the time I slipped away. I needed a break from the polite stares, the side glances, the well-meaning small talk about bravery and sacrifice from people who wouldn't last a day in my boots. I wandered through the quiet hallways of the country club, the air cooled and scented faintly with gardenias and champagne. I found an empty dressing room near the back, a sanctuary lined with velvet chairs and forgotten shawls, and sat down exhaling for what felt like the first time all day. A few minutes later, the door opened. Lena stood in the doorway. She didn't look angry. She didn't look composed either. Her posture was wilted, not like a bride glowing after the perfect day, but like a woman who had held her breath too long. Her eyes were glassy, hands trembling slightly. Still in her wedding gown, though the train was bunched in her arms, like she'd gathered it in haste. She closed the door behind her slowly, and said nothing at first. Just looked at me. Really looked. I'm not here to argue, she said finally. I nodded once. Good. I don't have the energy. We both chuckled quietly, and for a brief moment, the distance between us didn't feel like miles of expectation and silence. She sat down across from me. There was a pause. Not awkward, just careful. Do you know, she began, her voice uneven, how scared I used to be of losing you. I froze. She wasn't looking at me when she said it. Her gaze was fixed on the wall or maybe on some memory I wasn't a part of. Her fingers twisted the edge of her gown nervously. I used to watch the news obsessively, she continued. Whenever you were deployed, refreshing pages, checking every report, every name. My stomach would clench any time the phone rang at night. My breath caught, but I stayed silent. I couldn't sleep, she whispered. I'd lie awake thinking, what if she doesn't come back? What if the next knock on the door is a chaplain in uniform? I swallowed hard, the sharpness of her words hitting places I thought had gone numb. But you never said anything, I finally managed. You never wrote? Never asked? She nodded slowly. Because you seemed so composed, distant, strong in a way I didn't know how to reach. You'd come home and smile and say everything was fine, like you didn't need us, like you didn't need me. My hands curled into fists in my lap, not from anger, but from something deeper. A grief I hadn't named until now. I thought you judged me, I said. I thought you saw me as reckless, unfeminine, a disappointment. Lena looked up sharply, eyes wide with something between shock and sorrow. No, she said. Never disappointment. Just fear, and maybe guilt. Guilt? She nodded. I followed the script. The Ivy League, the stable fiancé, the job with the view. And you went off the page. You walked into fire and I was scared because I couldn't understand it. I thought if I stayed on the safe path, it would somehow protect me from losing you. I blinked against the sting rising in my chest. I never knew, I said. I never told you. We sat in silence for a long moment. Then her voice cracked. I was wrong, she said. So wrong. I looked at her, unsure what she meant. That day in the dressing room, she continued, when I said you couldn't wear white, that it wasn't for someone like you. Her face twisted with shame. God, Avery. I hear myself say it, and I want to disappear. I didn't interrupt. I let her speak. I meant tradition, image, what people might think. But underneath that, I think I was just trying to make sense of you, to box you into something safe and clean. Because the truth of who you are scared me. Her hands trembled again. She pressed them together tightly. You're not pure by wedding standards, she said softly. But you're real. So much more real than most people I know. And I'm sorry. I am so, so sorry I made you feel like you had to hide that. I felt my throat tighten. For so long I had imagined this moment happening with screaming, with slammed doors and decades of resentment rising like a tidal wave. But this soft unraveling, this quiet admission of fear and failure, was somehow more powerful. I didn't need you to be proud of me, I said. I just needed you to see me. Not as a symbol, not as someone you lost, but as someone who chose a different life. One that made sense to me. Lena wiped at her cheeks, makeup smudging. I see you now, she whispered. I don't understand everything, and maybe I never will. But I see you. We sat there a moment longer. Then she reached across the space between us and took my hand. I still want you in the picture, she said with a wry smile. In uniform. Standing next to me. I laughed softly, a sound that felt like a release. Deal, I said. She squeezed my hand. And just like that, the years between us began to dissolve. Not completely, not cleanly, but enough. Enough to start again. Enough to be sisters again. After the wedding, I returned to base. There was something comforting about the routine. The 6 a.m. runs the echo of boots in the hallway, the familiar smell of black coffee and boot polish. It had always been a strange kind of home, but it was mine. I'd chosen it when I couldn't find a place anywhere else. But something was different this time. I noticed it in the little things. The care package from my mom, for one. It arrived in a brown box like always, with her loopy handwriting scrawled across the front. But this time, when I opened it, I didn't find glossy fashion magazines or pastel nail polish. No scented candles or glittery socks. Instead, there were trail mix packets, energy bars, a new pair of socks meant for desert terrain, and a note. Just 5 words. Hope these actually help. Mom. I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't an apology. It didn't need to be. Then came the phone call from Dad. He called on a Sunday afternoon when I was halfway through polishing my boots. I almost didn't pick up. He rarely called without Mom prompting him. But this time, it was different. There was a pause after hello. Then he said, "That day in Kandahar. The one with the ambush." I tensed. I hadn't talked about it with my family. Not really. Just the filtered version. I read about it online, he continued. In your commendation. Another pause. Then gently. Were you scared I didn't know what hit harder? Hearing him ask or realizing it was the first time he'd tried? I took a breath. Yeah, I admitted. Terrified. There was a long silence, but not a bad one. Okay, he said. Thanks for telling me. That was it. That was everything. 2 months passed, and then Lena showed up on base. I was shocked when she texted me, "I want to see where you live, where you work, if you're okay with that." She arrived on a windy afternoon in February, stepping out of a rental car in a white sundress and strappy heels, completely unprepared for the reality of a military base. "Is this it?" she asked, looking around. "Where's the barbed wire?" I laughed. "We're not detaining supervillains. It's mostly paperwork and sand." She squinted at the row of beige buildings. "Honestly, looks like a high school campus that forgot to smile." Despite herself, she followed me. I introduced her to my team. People who'd seen me at my worst and best. There was Corporal Deshawn, who baked banana bread on Sundays. Sergeant Ortiz, who'd once stitched my arm with shaking hands in a Humvee. Private Ellis, fresh-faced and quick with puns. We had dinner together in the rec hall. Nothing fancy. Pasta salad, slightly stale bread. But Lena ate every bite, even complimented the garlic butter. And afterward, she helped stack trays. When the room cleared out, she leaned in and said softly, "I get it now." I looked up. "Get what?" "This isn't just your job," she said. "This is your family. Different blood, but still family." I felt something shift in my chest, gentle and deep. The kind of shift that only comes when someone finally speaks the words you didn't know you needed to hear. She stayed overnight in the guest lodging. Before bed, we sat on the couch in my small quarters drinking herbal tea from mismatched mugs. "I'm sorry it took me so long to come here," she said. "I'm glad you came at all," I replied. The next morning, I walked her out to the car. She hugged me, tight, lingering. And as she stepped inside, she said, "I'll write. This time I'll write." She did. We weren't suddenly perfect, but something between us had shifted permanently. And then came Christmas. It was the first time I brought someone home with me. Rachel, a fellow soldier who had no family of her own. Mom decorated like we were still kids, hanging stockings with our names on them. Dad cooked the ham. We played cards and drank cider and laughed until my stomach hurt. Lena and Ryan arrived Christmas Eve. She was glowing, pregnant, radiant, in a simple green dress. She pulled me aside before dinner, holding a small wrapped box. "We wanted to ask you something," she said. "Ryan and I. It's not just from me." I opened the box slowly. Inside was a pair of tiny white baby shoes. Delicate, soft, clearly for a girl. "We want you to be her godmother," she said, "because I want her to grow up knowing strength. Not just the kind that pushes back, but the kind that stands still when everything else demands she kneel. And I want her to know you." I couldn't speak for a moment. My throat closed. Lena reached for my hand. "I want her to grow up believing that truth is more important than tradition, that courage doesn't always look clean or quiet, and that sometimes family isn't about being the same, it's about choosing to understand." I looked down at the shoes, then back at her. "Even if she wears white someday," I teased gently. She smiled. "Only if she wants to." And just like that, the circle closed. The girl I'd once believed saw me as an embarrassment, now saw me as a guide. The family that once misunderstood me was still imperfect, but they were trying. And I wasn't hiding anymore. We weren't broken. We'd just learned to see each other differently. And sometimes that's all it takes. There was a time when I thought being different meant being alone, when I believed that the only way to keep the peace was to stay quiet, to stay small. But I've learned that peace built on silence isn't peace at all. And that sometimes the most loving thing we can do, for ourselves and for others, is to show up fully, even if it makes people uncomfortable at first. Families are complicated. Love doesn't always sound like understanding. But when we find the courage to stop hiding, we give others permission to see us, and maybe even to change. If this story resonated with you in any way, I hope you'll stay a little longer in this space. Subscribe, turn on the bell, and join me for more stories like this one. Stories about finding your voice, reclaiming your worth, and healing from the inside out. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next story.